Hi guys, in this guitar lesson I'm showing you my top 5 tips to nail the F bar chord. Now this F bar chord was not in my beginner's course, and I think with good reason. A lot of beginners try it, but it is really an improver or intermediate skill. Certainly if you can nail this chord in a song, you're at an improver intermediate level. So let's get in for a close-up and I'll demonstrate this chord and then show you my top 5 tips for absolutely nailing it, making it ring out and sound great. So this is it. This is the F bar chord. So the bar refers to what our first finger is doing here, where we're holding down multiple strings and then we're playing the rest of the chord by laying our fingers out in this fashion. So we have our first finger as straight as possible, laying up against this side of the fret and very much on the side, so this side of our first finger, which is my first tip. You want to make sure you're on the side of this first finger here, because the finger here is very fleshy and soft, whereas this part is much harder, a bit more bony, if you will. Basically, your first finger is acting as a capo. So that's our first tip. It wants to be as straight as possible, thinking about it like a capo. There can be a slight arch in it, that's totally fine, but most people kink here when they're first learning it. Now that is not going to work at all if we're barring. It's not going to hold down the strings. You want to have it more like this, with the first finger just poking over the top of the fretboard and your thumb directly behind where your first finger is, so that we have this pinch happening like this, and that is really the main strength muscle that is working when we're looking at bar chords. To show you the position of your other 3 fingers, we have your middle finger, finger 2, on the 3rd string at the 2nd fret for this F bar chord. Your 3rd finger, 3rd fret of the 5th string, and your little finger as close to underneath that as possible. Each finger should be at this side of the fret, not sort of in the middle. We want it to be at this side of the fret. And the concept for bar chords certainly is your first finger is very straight and flat, and fingers 2, 3 and 4 are more curved and more on the tips, so that your hand is on a slight angle towards you should lead to much better results, and that first finger ringing out and getting it to sound like this. Because this F bar chord uses such an amount of strength of this muscle here, we need to make sure that you're using that muscle when you're playing standard open chords. So for example, the first 2 chords in my beginner's course are E and A major. Now if you play that with your thumb too high and over the top like this, it can still ring out and sound fine. But that isn't working this muscle at all. The temptation for beginners is they slide the neck into here because it feels really comfortable and it is easier. However, for the majority of your chords, we want to have your thumb quite a bit lower so that we're gripping the neck more like this when we're changing between the E and the A, so that this pinching muscle for bar chords is working. So when we're playing any of our chords like this, that is working this pinching muscle, and it will make it easier to do this pinch which is required for the F bar chord. Tip number 3 is to train fingers 2, 3 and 4 separate to this bar chord technique that you're learning. So this bar chord, especially when we're changing between chords, you're asking an awful lot of the 3 weaker fingers of your hand. The closer to finger 1 you are, basically the stronger that finger is, and everyone's little finger is a little bit harder to control and a little bit weaker. So a great thing that I've found to train beginners with is choosing a couple of chords that you find quite easy, for example the E and the A chord, and playing them with fingers 2, 3 and 4 rather than fingers 1, 2 and 3. Now this can really throw some people, but it is illuminating that you need to train your fingers to do what you're wanting them to do. And if we look at this E chord shape played with fingers 2, 3 and 4, we can slide that up by 1 fret and it's the same as the F bar chord. So if you can't use the F bar chord in a song, Well, ask yourself, can you play the E chord normally in a song that uses the E chord, but use fingers 2, 3, and 4? And that really shakes up what can be a really kind of laborious exercise, and you can feel like you're not really doing anything while you're practicing the F bar chord. You're just sort of making an F bar chord shape, picking it, and making sure that the strings ring out by picking them individually. Use this way of playing an E chord in songs, and really, as well, this way of playing an A. You could go for my first song in my beginner's course, Buffalo Springfields, for what it's worth. E, 2, 3, 4, A, 2, 3, 4. But using those 3 fingers, and then when it comes to playing an F bar chord, and you need to change to any other chord, those 3 fingers, 2, 3, and 4, are used to doing that extra movement, that fine motor function that they're going to need. Tip number 4 is regarding chord changes, and it's showing you that you can actually lift off a lot earlier than you may think when you're practically using chords in songs. Certainly when it comes to bar chord. If you're struggling to play an F bar chord in a real song, you want to start changing on beat 4. Now that can seem like crazy if you've never done it before, but let's have a listen. I'm going to go between 2 of the most common chords, the F bar chord to a standard C chord. I'm going to use a fairly simple strumming pattern, 8ths all downs, and we're going to change on beat 4. Now watch how I change. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Now, did that sound terrible? No, it sounded like changing between any other chord. It sounded fine. For a beginner, that is substantially earlier. You're giving yourself a whole beat to change chord, and the worst thing that's going to happen is you play this chord. Kind of open strings. Nothingness, okay? If you have to change between F to an A minor, for example. You know, the worst thing that happens is we hit the open string. The best thing that can happen is you've stopped squeezing, but you haven't lifted off or left all the open strings ringing out, so you have some fingers left down so that we get kind of this sound happening. Listen for this sound this time when I'm changing chords. Now, is that ideal and what we're aiming for? Ideally, you want to be changing between bar chords on beat 4 and, so half a beat after that and changing that half a beat. But by changing on beat 4, you should be guaranteeing that you arrive on the next chord you're going for by beat 1, and that's the most important thing. If you arrive on the next chord you're going for, whatever chord it is, by beat 1, at the correct time, rhythm-wise, you will be absolutely fine. It will always work and you'll be able to continue your song correctly, rather than always having to have a big pause, which, for example, would sound like this. That is really not a good habit to practice, and not the way to practice to improve your bar chords or your general playing. Change on beat 4, arrive on the chord you're going for on beat 1. And my final top tip number 5 for your F bar chord is again regarding the changes between the chords, and it's know which chords commonly happen with an F chord, so that you don't have to practice the changes between every chord that might happen, because some are far more common than others. Now, F, from a theory point of view, tends to happen at this level when you're first learning it with songs in the key of C. And the most common changes there are between an F and a C chord, an F and a G chord, and an F and an A minor chord. So if you practice the changes methodically just on their own, between an F bar chord and a C, between an F bar chord and a G, and the F bar chord to an A minor, for a shorter amount of time, you're actually working on all the common ingredients of the songs that you're going to be learning. So let's just have a recap between those 5 things that are going to really improve your bar chords. And to see the worksheet that accompanies this lesson, click in the top corner so that you can see the lesson notes to remind you of this in your practice sessions. Tip number 1 is using the side of your first finger when you're playing, rather than the fleshy central part or flat part of your first finger. We want to be on the side. We want to build up our muscle that's controlling our thumb by using that thumb in open chords and having your thumb lower so that it's ready for the extra task of the F bar chord. Tip number 3 is we want to train fingers 2, 3 and 4 independently of bar chords by playing open chords just using these 3 fingers rather than using the first finger. Definitely, at the very least, playing the E major chord with fingers 2, 3 and 4 like this to strengthen those muscles and create some finger independence with those fingers. Tip number 4 is change chord on beat number 4. For example, to make sure that you arrive on the next chord by beat 1 of that bar, which is typically, in most songs, where you want to get to that chord by. And finally, don't practice changing from the F bar chord to any chord that's available or all the other chords that you know. Change between the 4 common chords, the F to a C, F to an A minor, and an F to a G, and you're learning the most common chords that are going to crop up in the songs that you're going to be learning. Finally, I do have a whole heap of songs on my YouTube channel and on my website. The playlist should be in the top corner or on the screen now or in the description. Loads of songs that use this F bar chord as great examples. I would certainly recommend Adele's Rolling in the Deep as one of the first ones that you try, and after that just pick your favourites. And look out for my Improve a Guitar course coming later this year, where we're going to be covering all the bar chords and more advanced ways of playing open chords and more advanced strumming, fingerstyle, lots of things coming up later this year on this channel. So be sure to subscribe if that's something for you, and I will see you again. Take care of yourselves and bye for now.